What if the moment Jesus left was actually the moment everything truly began? What if his absence didn't mean distance, but a new kind of presence? And what if the final scene on earth was actually the opening of a mission that would never end? After everything, the cross, the tomb, the resurrection, the story reaches a moment that feels quiet, almost simple, but carries enormous weight. Jesus had spoken to his disciples. He had given them direction, a mission, a purpose that extended far beyond what they could fully understand. They had seen him alive. They had heard his voice again. They had moved from fear to something deeper, something steadier. But now something unexpected was about to happen. Jesus was taken up into heaven. There was no long build-up, no dramatic warning, just a transition, a shift from visible to unseen, from walking beside them to something different, something they would have to learn to understand. He was taken up and sat at the right hand of God. That phrase carries meaning, not just movement, but position, authority, completion. The work on earth, what he came to do, had reached its fulfillment. And now, he was no longer limited by place, no longer bound by physical presence. This was not departure as loss, it was transition into something greater. But for the disciples, this must have been confusing. They had just regained him, after loss, after grief, after believing everything was over. And now, he was gone again. But this time it was different, because this was not sudden, not violent, not forced. It was intentional, peaceful, purposeful, and that changes how we understand it. Because sometimes what looks like leaving is actually positioning for something greater to happen. The disciples stood in that moment, watching, processing, trying to understand what this meant. Because their experience with Jesus had always been physical, walking together, talking, seeing, hearing. But now, that was changing. And with that change came responsibility. Because after he was taken up, they didn't stay still. They didn't go back to hiding. They didn't retreat into fear. They went out. They began to preach everywhere. That's the shift. From receiving to releasing, from following to leading, from observing to acting. And here's the key detail. The Lord worked with them and confirmed his word by the signs that accompanied it. Even though Jesus was no longer physically present, he was still active, still involved, still working. That's the part that changes everything. Because it means the ascension was not separation, it was expansion. His presence was no longer limited to one place. It moved through them, through their actions, through their words, through their willingness to go. And that's where this becomes deeply personal. Because the ascension is not just about Jesus going up, it's about what happens next, what happens here, with those who remain. Because the mission didn't end, it multiplied, it moved outward, it reached beyond what had been seen before. The disciples didn't suddenly become perfect, they didn't have everything figured out, but they had something real, something that transformed them, and now they carried it. That's what the ascension reveals. That the story is not meant to stop at one point. It continues through people, through action, through faith that steps forward even when everything isn't fully clear. There's something challenging about this moment because it removes the visible. It removes the comfort of seeing, of having everything right in front of you, and replaces it with something deeper. Trust, faith, movement without full certainty. Because now, they had to believe in a different way. Not based on what they could see, but based on what they had experienced. And that's where growth happens, because faith that depends only on sight stays limited. But faith that continues even without seeing expands, deepens, strengthens. The ascension marks that shift from visible dependence to internal conviction, from external presence to internal transformation. And that's what empowered them to go, to speak, to act. Because they knew something had changed. Not just around them, but within them. The same is true today, because we often look for visible confirmation, clear signs, physical evidence, something we can hold on to. But the ascension invites a different kind of trust, a trust that doesn't rely on constant visibility, a trust that moves forward even when things aren't fully seen. That doesn't mean blind belief, it means grounded confidence, based on something real, something experienced, something that continues to show itself over time. The disciples didn't stay in that moment looking up. They didn't remain frozen, waiting. They moved, because they understood something important, that the mission was now theirs to carry. Not alone, but with support, with presence, with something that would work through them. And that changes perspective, because it means we are not just observers of a past story, we are participants in a continuing one. The Ascension is not an ending, it's a handoff, a passing of responsibility, a moment where what began with Jesus continues through others, and that includes us, in our own way, in our own context, in our own moments. It doesn't always look dramatic, it doesn't always feel significant, but every action, every word, every choice carries the potential to reflect something greater. Because the same message, the same purpose, still moves, still reaches, still transforms. The Ascension reminds us that physical absence does not mean spiritual distance. That what we cannot see can still be active, that what we cannot touch can still be real. And that changes how we live, how we respond, how we move forward. Because it means we are not waiting for something to begin, it has already begun. We are stepping into something that is already in motion. The disciples went out, not perfectly, not without challenges, but they went. And as they did, something happened. The message spread, lives changed, something continued beyond that moment. And that's the legacy of the Ascension. Not a departure, but a multiplication. Not an ending, but a beginning. A shift from one place to everywhere. From one voice to many, from one moment to a continuous movement. The question is not whether the story continues, it does. The question is whether we recognize our place in it, whether we choose to step into it, to move, to act, to carry something forward. Even when we don't see everything clearly. Because the disciples didn't have all the answers, but they had enough. Enough to go, enough to begin, enough to trust that they were not alone. And that's what matters. Not complete understanding, but willingness. Not perfect clarity, but action. Because the Ascension is not just about where Jesus went, it's about what we do now. And that's where the story continues. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.